Welcome to the OrangeNXT podcast series.
Welcome to a new episode of the OrangeNXT podcast series. My name is John Coate and I will be your host and moderator of today. Today in this podcast we are going into AI on the edge, and to talk about this subject I have invited my old good friend Maarten. Maarten, may I ask yourself to introduce yourself, who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, John. Hello. How are you doing on this wonderful time of the day, whenever this is? Because I need to get used to the fact that it's a podcast. Hey, my name is Maarten Struijs. I'm based in the Netherlands, hence my funny accent, I guess. Working for Microsoft for about 9 years, started in the Windows embedded team. And, since embedded these days consists all of IoT type of solutions, I moved on to becoming an IoT solution architect. And as such, working a lot with partners and introducing new devices, new technologies, amongst which Azure Percept.
Very good, very good. Welcome to the show today. So during Ignite, we saw that Microsoft revealed some extensions on the AI capabilities to the edge. And you already mentioned it is Azure Percept. It's an end-to-end platform that Microsoft has built. Can you give us a little help here? Can you elaborate on what Azure Percept is?
Yes, absolutely. So Azure Percept it's artificial intelligence, if you wish, on the edge. Now, that's just some terminology here that what does that really mean? So let me just share a little bit of, an indication of what Percept is. And I'm calling it Azure Percept. Some of my coworkers are calling it Azure Percept, but I cannot, there's no way that I can keep that up. So even if Percept is probably the Dutch way of saying it, it's like how I'm gonna talk about it. Now, what you see here is a Percept dev kit. This development kit contains of a couple of modules, and if you are trying to purchase it, and we talk about purchasing it later, what you will get is at least a Azure Percept Trust module. And this thing here, it's your microprocessor board, if you wish. It's an edge device. You can call it a gateway. It's responsible for secure communication between additional modules and secure communication to the cloud. This thing runs an edge runtime, and it can connect to an Azure Percept Vision module. And what you see in this Vision module, this is a SOM, a system on module. It contains 2 GB of RAM, basically, and you see a tiny little camera there as well. And there's room for another camera. So this thing can add vision to a solution. And what we can do with that is, for instance, things like image recognition. And then there's an optional audio module available as well with a microphone array where you can do the same things by, for instance, doing voice recognition or something. So there are tons and tons of scenarios that you can think of where this can be used. And what's important here is, we used to think about artificial intelligence as something that's happening in the cloud. We're, like building and training modules. But what are you going to do after that? Because often you want to make decisions as fast as possible and as close by where actually things are happening. Therefore, you need to make those decisions on the edge. And that's where Percept plays an important role.
So in short, I might say it is an integrated hardware accelerated platform with Azure AI and Azure IoT services that are basically designed in a simple way that it is ready to use with a minimum setup.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. Very good. So we are living in a very fast-paced world where there is a need of quick responses, and you already mentioned it in your elaboration on Azure Percept. We need to have close actions close to the edge. So every company, every developer are seeing this benefit. We are living in this 24/7 mentality. Everything needs to be quick. So is this why Microsoft comes up with the Azure Percept, or is there more behind the idea of Percept?
Well, one of the things is indeed you need to act quickly, and what we want to eliminate is kind of, the latency from, something that's happening in the cloud and that needs to be brought to a factory, for instance, or something. Let's say, for instance, let's say that I would use hypothetically a device like this as my eyes for an autonomous car that can drive.
Yeah.
And it's going to check for obstacles, like ahead of the car or something. If it recognizes another car or maybe somebody crossing the road, what you want to do is instantly use the brakes to slow down your car. If I would have to have, like a situation where first I need to go to the cloud, there I need to run an AI module, then the module says like, well, there's something in front of you. Then I go back to the car. Guess what happened? I just crashed into something and bad things are happening. That's why edge computing is very important. And then there are quite a few scenarios where you could think, like, and vision comes really into mind. Like vision can be used for so many things, like for instance, like to measure stocks in a shop or something, but also for security purposes, of course. Is somebody wearing their security helmet? Is somebody entering an area where they're not supposed to be? So many, many scenarios there.
Very good, very good. And probably you can imagine, I also hear them because I'm also playing with the same kit that you just showed us. I'm also from Origin and developer, so I still love to play with technology. So probably you get a lot of questions like, how much is the development kit cost? How much is how much are the accessories? In which markets are they available in? How can I get it? Can you help us out here? Where we can do that all?
I can help you a little bit there,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure if it's a great answer that I'm giving today.
Try to do your best.
If you would have lived in the United States,
Yeah.
you would be able to buy them in the Microsoft Store today.
Okay.
There are a number of countries, I think up to 15 countries in total right now, that are supposed to have Azure Edge for sale through the Microsoft Store. The Netherlands, good news for us here, is amongst them. But there are a couple of things. If you're selling hardware, that hardware needs to be certified. It's just like the electronics need to be certified for certain markets. For the US, that has been done. We are, I think, still in the process for doing that for a couple of other European countries. But then, and this is what's the real challenge here, since a couple of months, and this all has to do, unfortunately, with COVID-19, there is a difficult supply chain for silicon. So we are running into that as well, actually. So probably we are not able to produce as much as we were willing to. So if you look today in the and I think we have some links afterwards, like that listeners can actually and viewers can take a look at. But if you look today at availability, you will see that there's a waiting list for the Netherlands, and the waiting list is full at this moment. I hope that this is going to change fast, but I don't have a real insight in when that's going to happen. So.
And do you know the price that Microsoft are selling it for?
It's in the US store. It's roughly about $320, I think. And for that, you get all those different components.
The 3 components.
Additionally, well, you get the 2 components, the vision and the security module. If you want to have the microphone as well, I think that's an additional $70 or something. If you look at the amount of hardware you get for that, especially, for instance, if you take a look at the security module, it's a pretty nice IMX8 based, NXP IMX8 based processor board. It has like 4 gig of storage, 4 gig of RAM and 16-bit of storage. So it's a pretty nice device on which you definitely can run containerized AI workloads.
Very good, very good. And the next question that I have for you is like, it's going into the challenges. Me also as a developer and especially also the organization that I already have contact with they all see the benefits of AI on the edge. You already mentioned it, like the latency that they want to have it very close to the process itself. We all know that it is the challenges is like time to develop, end-to-end development, the deployment. How can you maintain it, the manageability of all of that, but also from some roadblocks that you're seeing, like how can I train the AI models? Am I capable of doing that? How can we help with that? And then additional on top of that is that you need to have some silicon, some hardware that is low power enough, yet performant enough, that can still do the job for you. And so can you share your insights on challenges that you see at customers or partners that you work with?
Well, initially, like one of the things that we have been saying continuously is like, hey, like typically if you're building an AI solution, you build it in the cloud, you train your models in the cloud, so you make sure that you have enough historical data in order to be able to train things. And then people, like once they have those models, they're immediately going to ask like, yeah, but you know what? I have a Raspberry Pi or I have an MX chip device. I want to run, like that model. I want to run that actually on those devices. I don't want to use the cloud for that for many obvious reasons. So from the beginning onwards, we are trying to, like bring down those modules in as tiny as containers as possible. That's what's happening here. But then there's another trend, like many people, the majority of the world's population probably is not a data scientist. And in order to build those models and to train those models, some data science definitely is needed there. So we also are heavily investing in no-code or low-code solutions for this. So what I showed before, and I needed to make sure that everybody gets that, is I showed the hardware on a little picture, the Azure Percept hardware, but there's more to it. There's also a one-stop, let's say, web portal in which we have a number of pre-trained models available already, in which you can also develop and train your own models. You make use of your Azure subscription for that. And then just with one click, you can download that particular module to a Percept device. So it means that, hey, without having to think about, like data science or something, if it's a vision scenario, for instance, I'm just going to take pictures. I'm going to take pictures using my Percept AI module, and I'm going to upload those pictures to the cloud. I'm going to train them there. And then the trained model, I'm going to deploy that back to my Percept device, and there it's going to execute. And in the meantime, we slim or trim that module down as well, so it's making very, very efficient use of the capabilities of the Percept device itself. So, for instance, in this particular one, there's an Intel VPU on board, and we utilize the power of that video processing unit to run AI workloads very, very efficiently.
Okay, very good. So how does it, because in the end, I think it is AI, but it's also an IoT kind of scenario, what you're saying. So how does it integrate with the IoT Hub or Stream Analytics or Time Series Insights, for instance? So basically, how does it integrate in the Azure IoT and AI stack of Microsoft? Can you show us something?
Absolutely. And let me just share my screen again, and let's take a look at initially at something that is actually really, really interesting if you think about it. Because if we are thinking about AI, typically what we would do is, for instance, recognize these objects as bananas.
Yeah.
And this means that, hey, there is no time constraint in there. So this is static evaluation of things. But this really gets added value if we add some dynamics to it. So if we do this over time, and then you're going to ask yourself questions like, when will I need to restock my bananas? Or are those bananas selling fast enough? Because you don't want to turn them to yellow, like, because then, like at some point, they are turning bad. So we need that time component in there. Now, that's a very important one to have added as well. And that's where you see the IoT play an important role as well. So let me just show you what I'm really meaning here. Oh, interesting that we have some updates to install. How cool is that? Let's not do that right now.
I received it today as well.
Let me refocus to what I wanted to show. So this actually is the Percept Studio that I was talking about. This is this portal on which I can show my devices, get an overview. So here is my Percept device itself. It's an active device. And this device runs an IoT Edge runtime. This is so the secure module that I said is actually running a IoT Edge runtime. And I can show that here so this is the version number of that runtime, but let's also see the different modules that are in there. If I can remember my password, that is. Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So what you can see is that, hey, I'm using an image capture module inside this Edge solution, a web stream module, so I have the capability to stream video back to a browser, for instance. I have a speech analysis module. I have the eye module that actually does the image recognition. And then I have some, like security things like an Edge agent and a connection to an IoT hub. So that's all part of this. And what I can do now, for instance, is open this particular device inside my IoT hub. So I'm going to log on there, and what you will see right now is a couple of things once we're there. So you see my Edge module inside IoT Hub. It's an Edge device inside IoT Hub. What you can see is the same modules that I showed, like in the remote SSH on the device itself. So I have that. I have those available for view on the IoT Hub web page as well. I have a device twin. Inside that device twin, I specified that I have an Azure device update group. So what I can also do is update this particular device over the air. And for that, let me show the IoT hub that I'm using right now. What you will see is right now also is that, hey, I'm sending lots of cloud to the device to cloud messages. This is the traffic that is going from my Percept solution into IoT Hub. Now, I'm not streaming video here. I'm just sending out little reports whether or not we recognize objects. And in a minute, I'm going to show those as well. But what I also want to show, and definitely not want to forget, is that, hey, in order to update this device, and this is not something that is restricted to IoT Edge, because any IoT device, or to Percept, but any IoT device would be able to do this as long as it's plug and play compatible. But if I select, or if I take a look at my devices here, you will see that, hey, I did an over-the-air update yesterday for this particular device, and currently I'm on the latest update. If there would be a new update, it would indicate that an update would be available, and only by just clicking here and by deploying it, I would get a device update. So that's extremely simple to do as well. And that's the other thing, basically, for Percept. We want to make it as simple as possible to use for users. But at the same time, we also want to have it highly secure. But the idea is, hey, I switch it on, I select my Wi-Fi network connection, I select my Azure subscription, and that should be about it. So I can now also show live telemetry. And this is that time series data that is, like every half a second or something, I'm sending something. We recognize a keyboard, we recognize a person, and we recognize a book. So you probably are curious now, right now, like, yeah, but that's all cool, but what are you recognizing? So let me show the stream as well. So I'm going to show my device stream of my camera right now. And you see me sitting there right now, picking up the camera, and you recognize a person. This is that secure trust module that is connected to it as well. And we find a bottle there, which is true too. And so this model is pretty good in recognizing objects. However, it's not a perfect module. So if my, like my audience is coming in vision, it sometimes does recognize it as a person, sometimes as a cat. Funny enough, not now, of course, but as you can see, at least I am working with an audience here. So the whole experience is simple, and that's just very important. If I want to train my own models, for instance, and also another possibility, I could, like create a vision project. And I created a project with playing cards. And now in order to get images captured, what I'm going to do is, like I can just capture images using my Percept device. And then after that, I can go into custom vision here, which is a representation of my project. And what you can see there is basically, like how my model looks like. And it should be here somewhere. So here are all the different, like images I used to train a playing card recognition model. I'm adding some images, I'm tagging those images, then I'm training the model, I'm deploying it back to the Percept device. And now all of a sudden, instead of recognizing generic objects, it only recognizes playing cards without any coding, just a little bit of image manipulation. So there's a lot of things that you can do actually with this.
Wow. And you're not a data scientist, right?
No, I'm absolutely not a data scientist.
So you Microsoft did a lot of work on making it accessible, AI accessible for everybody. So what I just saw in your demo is that everything is done by Microsoft already out of the box. That everybody can use train their own AI models. It's hooked up to the IoT stack. It makes it possible for everybody to maintain it from there on, and also use it in other scenarios where everybody can use it in other ever-changing world, let's say, but they're now also running AI on the edge. Yeah, that's basically what we just saw. So it really, I think, accelerates the customers doing their business in another way, and I think Azure Percept can really help there. So what is basically the business model behind Azure Percept? And maybe you can share some thoughts about how can approach partners, but also customers with such kind of projects, but also the business model behind Azure Percept.
So there are a couple of things. There are a couple of things there that come into play, and if you look at the history, and I need to, you cannot limit that discussion to Azure Percept alone. You need to talk about Azure IoT Edge, for instance, as well. So in the Edge devices, you can have different containers running. And the vision has always been that, hey, like third parties, our partners, our most, like valuable assets, basically, if you wish, because we are working with our partners. We don't have any business model to begin with. But partners, of course, want to monetize containers if they invested in building those containers. Some of those containers can, like have a AI workload. So once we have the whole billing in place, and I think that's due pretty soon actually for IoT Edge, then partners can, like maybe get the modules that they might have been working for years already on, like they can monetize them in a whole brand new market of Azure Percept devices. So that's one thing. Another important thing is there's a whole, of course, today we have first-party hardware. We have this development kit, but the idea of Percept is that many hardware partners will build devices as well, and probably not only limit them to eyes and ears, but I can imagine that there would be other sensor type devices that need some intelligence as well. So there's going to be a large market for or opportunity for hardware partners as well to actually sell third-party devices. You can also imagine, and we didn't announce anything here right now, but this module that we're using right now, this IoT Edge module, think about what if I need a heavier workload? Could I run this on maybe an Azure Stack solution or something? So the vision is that, hey, this is the start of a product of brand new devices, really bringing AI to the edge. And also, like that's the other thing I need to tell here is that, hey, we are not limited to my non-data scientist approach of, like easy building some models or something, because I also realize that, hey, in reality, this is probably much more complex than just recognizing me as a person or something. Mm-hmm. So the investment in training models, building models, using different technology to build modules, we are not restricted to just our cognitive services here, but you can use all, like let's say, training technologies that are existing. So we're also not restricted to, like using either TensorFlow or some of the other, like frameworks that are used, maybe OpenVINO. This one particularly works with OpenVINO because of its Intel graphics processor or video processor unit. But there's a lot of, like there's a lot of flexibility there. You can start from scratch, like with nothing, gathering data, using that data to train models completely on your own. You can do that maybe through Jupyter notebooks or something like that. Tons and tons and tons of possibilities. And for that, I need to one more time share my desktop, basically. If I'm allowed to. I mean, I'm sorry, if you let me talk, then this is the end result, I guess. But one of the things I wanted to show, and that's also like, hey, where do I need to go? If you are a data scientist, or if you want to know a little bit more of, like advanced development using Percept, you should go to the GitHub repository that I'm showing right now. And basically, step by step, we're going to show you how to really train modules and build modules from scratch, even, like bringing your own model pipelines, etc. Now, this is not for the faint-hearted, like this is something that I'm trying this a little bit. And yes, I can, like follow the examples, but often I don't really know what I'm doing yet, but that'll change over time, I'm sure. But there's a lot of things here already that you can do also if you want to do advanced models.
Very good. Very, very interesting. So you already mentioned it. You're not a data scientist, but you already scratched the surface about the ML frameworks that you also show just in the GitHub. So Azure Percept, let's say, you get started in minutes. You can apply AI solutions to the edge using the cameras or the listening devices that you just show. You can use a library of pre-built Azure AI models for edge scenarios like object detection that you just mentioned, or anomaly detection, or for instance, keyword spotting, and many, many more. You can also customize your training and deployment of AI models, what you just show with your playing cards. So all along with the cloud and your Azure Machine Learning account that you have available. So on top of that ML frameworks that you just mentioned, what are the typical edge scenarios you are seeing in the market that are used with, let's say, Azure Percept as a starting point?
Well, what you see right now is, of course, so Azure Percept is, like I think it's officially in public preview right now. We just came out of private preview. So we are really at the beginning there. We see a lot of, interest, customer interest. But the Percept development kit is also, it's not used for production typically. So it's really used for rapid prototyping and for, like an ideation phase right now. What we see are things around access control. What we are seeing things around quality control in a, like manufacturing environment or in a retail environment. Security is not limited to access control alone, but security, what I mentioned at the beginning, I think already, is are you wearing your yellow hard hat, or are you entering a area where it's not allowed to enter? We see that, for instance, really in the offshore industry, where some areas, like on a drilling platform or something, are completely, like only authorized people can go there, if at all. And there we are doing studies, like to really take that there. Then I can already see, like with this on the edge and with me dreaming away, it's like, well, this should be mobile as well. And the device itself is pretty much mobile already. So why not have this on a drone, have the drone flying autonomously over, like maybe an agricultural area and measuring, like the drought of the surface or something.
Very interesting. So we are closing to the end of the podcast because we want to make it crisp as possible. So I always wanted to share you the opportunity to the audience where we can find more information. You already show something. I also heard that you will send us some links to particular sites. But is there anything what you would love to add where people need to go to look afterwards?
Well, the simplest way to go to something is go to aka.ms/Azure Percept.
Okay.
That's the simplest. There you get, like your one-stop shop where you can find the documentation, where you find a link to where to purchase Percept devices. There's also a link to that GitHub repository that I showed you. That like if you want to go real deep with this. And the other thing, and maybe that's the important. If there's one takeaway that I would actually, hopefully, have listeners and viewers, like taking away from this podcast is like, hey, artificial intelligence is being democratized by Microsoft right now. There's no reason not to start with this. So go start using, like ready to use models, but then invest a little bit and, like train your own models and come up with fantastic solutions, and please share them with us and talk to OrangeNXT, like if you have an idea for a solution, but if you don't know how to build that solution.
Very good. It has been a great conversation, Maarten. Thank you so much for taking the time and share your story with us, and also for the people who are watching. I will say, on behalf of Maarten and myself, thank you for your time and attention, and see you next time on the new episode of the OrangeNXT podcast series. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the OrangeNXT podcast series.